Hey, welcome to One Dad's Bookshelf. My name is Luke Rosenberger, and I don't really know what I'm doing, but I'm starting a podcast. Why start a podcast when there are millions of podcasts already available? I really don't know. I don't know if I'll add a whole lot of conversation. I don't know if anybody will watch this or listen to this beside my wife and maybe my mom. But I'm starting a podcast because I want to encourage people to read. I want to encourage really men in particular to read. Now, if you're a woman, you can listen to this, you can watch this, obviously, and I hope that I'm an encouragement to you as well. But as I'm a man, and I know a lot of other guys that haven't necessarily embraced reading, and that has been the story of my life. But what I've come to discover that as I press into reading and as I read good books that challenge my mind and challenge the way that I live. I'm a follower of Jesus Christ. I am a Christian, and as I find good books that also encourage me to follow faithfully after Jesus Christ. All of those things in combination, as I read, what I've come to discover is that it has helped me to rise above the ordinary. I recognize in my own life, I am not going to drift towards what is better. It takes work, it takes effort, it takes other people pouring into me. And books have been a fantastic resource that have helped me along the way. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about my journey in this episode to becoming a reader, why a little bit more why I'm doing this and what I'm trying to accomplish in this podcast. But before we dive into a little bit more about the podcast, let me just share a little bit about myself. As I said, my name is Luke Rosenberger. First and foremost, I am a Christian. I want my life to be modeled after Jesus Christ. I want everything that I do to be honoring to Him. I believe that why I exist is to love God, and the overflow of that is to love the people around me. So that's a big characteristic of my life. I'm married. My wife and I have been married for closing in on 20 years. She is a wonderful woman who has stuck by my side as we have journeyed from different places. Where I grew up in Michigan, we met in college in a small Bible college in Pennsylvania. And then we've lived there and then moved to Michigan. And then we're in Ohio. And now we're currently in North Carolina raising our kids. That's the next thing about me. As the title of the whole podcast says, I'm a dad. This is One Dad's Bookshelf. I'm a dad. I've got 5 kids, all girls, and people hear that and it blows their mind. First of all, that I have 5 kids, kind of like Jim Gaffigan. He's a comedian. He says that big families are kind of a lot like waterbeds. They used to be everywhere, and now they're just kind of weird. We're bigger than normal in our day and age, but then we have all girls. I grew up in a household of boys, an older brother, a younger brother, but now I'm raising daughters. And pretty soon, 4 of my girls will be in the teenage stage. One of the reasons I'm starting this podcast is because the books that I read oftentimes become our dinner time conversations. And they also become my wife and I. We love to get out after dinner oftentimes and take a walk with each other. And I'll give all of the credit to her, or you can say all of the blame to her for really this podcast getting started, because she's been saying for a little while now, it's like, hey, Luke, you should start a podcast. You love to give me a brief synopsis of the book, and you love to share what you're learning and where you're growing and the things that you're challenged by or the things that you disagree with. You are sharing that all the time with me. She's like, maybe there's other people that could be encouraged by it. And so I don't know if that'll be the case. I don't want to presume that I have a whole lot of information and wisdom that has been built up. But at the very least, I want to be helpful. And Laura has been spurring me on to do something like this for a period of time. And it was actually only a couple of weeks ago. I'm like, all right, let's do this. Let's dive in. And I'm a type of guy that when I dive in. I'm all in. I didn't want to break the bank. I could have gone out and bought a lot of things because I have a tendency to do that. Amazon is super simple to say, I like that. I'm going to go purchase that. And so I purchased a few things, a microphone and a little bit of lighting. So hopefully this is a little bit quality of material that we're putting together, but I'm getting started. And I'll probably ramble a little bit. I do that from time to time. But as I get back to earlier, I mentioned just a couple of minutes ago that I didn't grow up a reader. There's a few books that I enjoyed reading when I was a little kid, or into my teenage years. Of course, the comic books like Calvin and Hobbes, or there are other books that I enjoyed reading where it was Encyclopedia Brown, which is kind of like a choose your own adventure, choose your own ending type book. But outside of that, there weren't a whole lot of books that I would read on my own. There were times that I had to read for school, and I did discover along the way there were a couple of books I enjoyed reading as a young boy. I enjoyed reading Where the Red Fern Grows or The Hatchet, but those are books that I had to read. But outside of that, I was not picking up a book on my own saying, hey, I enjoy this. And so I went through all of high school, I went through all of college, and I had to read a lot because of what was put upon me, but it was never out of pure enjoyment. It wasn't until I was in my late 20s. I can vividly remember in the spring of 2008, I had the opportunity to go to a pastor's conference, which is crazy. Here I am saying I didn't like to read, but I was a pastor, which most pastors, they've got like a bookshelf like this, like just to start with. But it was in my late 20s. I went to this pastor's conference in downtown Chicago at Moody Bible Institute. At the time, I was serving as a youth pastor in Michigan, and it was a phenomenal conference. Getting to hear individuals speak that I'd heard on the radio or that I'd heard on CD. This is back in the day before everyone had their own smartphone to listen to things on and podcasts. And I had the opportunity to listen to some guys like John Piper and John MacArthur and Chip Ingram and Vonnie Baucham. And these are guys that maybe you've heard of, maybe you're not, but they're pastors, and they were phenomenal in what they had to say. And I was greatly encouraged by this conference. But something that was also interesting about this conference was during the in-between times of the teaching, we would head over to the gymnasium when they had turned it into a bookstore. And so I would walk up and down the aisles, but I wasn't necessarily looking to purchase anything because, like I said, I wasn't necessarily into reading a whole lot at the time. And it was at this conference, though, that as you would walk through these aisles, there would be certain books that were free. It came with the purchase of your ticket for the conference. And so it was just several days in a row of book after book after book after book being handed to me. And I get done with the end of this conference, and I look at this bag full of resources, and I go, oh my goodness, I counted up the books. They're like 25, 26, 27, somewhere in that neighborhood of amount of books. Like there's a lot of resources here. What am I going to do with it? I'm going to bring it home with me, of course. But it's kind of like I had this click in my mind of, Luke, you think about all the things that you don't know, all of the things that you're asking God for wisdom, and here's this stack of books that are being handed to you, literally handed to you for free. I mean, they're already been purchased, they're all been paid for, and now it's being put into your hands. What are you going to do with it? I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm asking God for wisdom, and I'm asking God for insight and understanding. And oftentimes what I want like this immediate answer where it's just going to be like, all right, just this brilliant idea just pops into my mind that's just been floating around, and finally it settles. But God is providing those resources. God is providing that information, that wisdom, and that knowledge from other people that I may never have the opportunity to sit down and have a conversation with one-on-one. But this might even be even better. It's them pouring out their insight and their wisdom and then whittling it down into bite-sized pieces within a book that I can take and I can read, I can open up, and I can put it into my hands, and I can highlight, I can write, I can think through what's being said. And so I'll say that conference, that it changed my life. going from I'm not necessarily a reader and eager to do it to going, oh, there's something here. I can't waste this opportunity. As I was preparing for this podcast, I came across a quote. It's from a fiction book, and I've never read this book in particular, but I thought it was really appropriate. It's from one of the books in the Dune series. I know there's another Dune movie that has just come out, and I know there's people all geeked up for it. Honestly, I never got into the book Dune, but I found this quote really helpful from that book. It says, "The capacity to learn is a gift. The ability to learn is a skill. And the willingness to learn is a choice." I mean, did you catch that? I mean, the capacity to learn is a gift. I mean, it's not something that we can just, well, we could just say, hey, the capacity to learn is something we just pass by. It goes on to say the ability to learn is a skill. It's something that has to be learned and it has to be developed. But the willingness to learn is a choice. And it was from that moment in the spring of 2008, they go, I have a choice to make here. What am I going to do? Am I going to take this opportunity to learn? Or am I going to humble myself and I'm going to get disciplined and say, this is something that's too good to pass by? And so I've been on this journey, and I want to bring other people on this journey to encourage them to read. Because I come across guys all the time that say, I don't really like to read. I want to tell you that it's worth it. I understand that you're going to come across books that you don't like. I'm going to come across, you're going to come across books that are very dry and boring, and I am still there. I don't pick up every single good book and go, this is a page turner, this is amazing, this is awesome. There's some books that I start, I'm like 3 chapters in, and I'm like, this is pretty dumb. I want to do something different. And oftentimes I do. I'm still not in the boat where I would be saying that I am reading just for fun. I still do enjoy doing a lot of other things, but I recognize the discipline that through reading, I am going to gain something oftentimes. And I believe that the mind is like a muscle, that it needs to be stretched and it needs to be put into the gym. Just like going to the gym and running, which I also love to do. I am a runner and I love to run, but like if I'm, and that's going to exercise my heart and my body and my lungs and all of these different things. But if I'm going to exercise my brain, exercise my mind, it's going to best be done through reading. And so I want to encourage others to read. I know I'm a little bit rambling and I'm going to go on too much longer in this very first episode, but I want to encourage you to join along with me. You asked the question, who is this podcast for? It really is for anyone. But as I also said, I want to specifically target men. If I can inspire to just pick up a book every now and then, I believe I'll be successful in starting this. Encourage you to read. Find something good to read. But what am I going to do on this podcast? Am I just going to get on a podcast every single week? Or I'm not going to do this every single week, but every time I do a podcast, am I going to just say, hey, read, you should read? Now, what I want to do on this podcast in particular is I want to go through books. Particularly what I want to do is I want to give my thoughts on particular books. And so what I'll be doing every single episode that we have one, I mean, there might be some things that we do in between, but what I'm going to do primarily is I want to pick out a good book. I want to tell you about it, and I want to encourage you to read along with me or read after I've done so. I'm going to pick it up. I'm going to share with you my kind of a synopsis, kind of give you a broad overview of what the book is about. But then what I'll do throughout that episode is I'll dive into a book and talk about it a little bit. What kind of books am I going to read? Well, I'm going to read books that really I like to read. I don't necessarily read a whole lot of fiction. I'm not against it. I think that I probably should read some more fiction books that just open my mind and kind of just imagine a little bit bigger and a little bit broader sometimes. But primarily the books that I read Christian books. I read biographies. I read leadership books. And just like kind of anything else that I kind of pick up that I find like that could be somewhat insightful. That's probably where I'm going to primarily go. And the first book that I'm going to cover in my podcast, which is not going to be right now, but it'll be in the next episode, is a book called Everybody Always by Bob Goff. It's a book that I've read a number of years ago. I read it probably 5 or 6 years ago, and it was very encouraging to me then, as it's a book that really encourages you to love the people around you, to live out this love that God has called us to live out. I'm rereading it right now to prepare for that episode. I hope that you'll join me. My hope is that the podcast will last somewhere around 10 to 15 minutes at a time. Don't hold me to that, because sometimes I go a little bit long and I just start talking and I just talking to myself. I know, but I can get going on a subject that I find interesting. So please join us. I want to encourage you to rise above the ordinary. I want to encourage you to get in a book in order to stretch your mind, to work out that muscle that God has given you. There are a lot of good books out there, and you may not like some of the books I read. That's okay. I hope that you'll join us anyways. If this is something that you're interested in, go ahead and leave a comment in the comment section, whatever thoughts or questions that you might have along the way. But thanks for tuning in as we journey into One Dad's Bookshelf.